Thank you all for being part of the 200 people who have gathered tonight to say good day to Ron and to Elizabeth and to the Tindale family. And in addition to the 200 of us who are here, there were many dozens of people who sent their apologies. They simply weren't able to be here. One friend of Ron's said, "I would very much appreciate if you could read out this note." It's my great pleasure to say, "Hi Ron, this is your old friend Derek Howes. I'm sorry I cannot be with you tonight, but I've just returned home after a 2-week stay in your hotel and I'm not yet ready to fly solo." Ron, we've been colleagues and friends for over 30 years now. If you remember, we competed against each other for the position of CEO at Hornsby when Stan Williams retired. You won the day and took on, in addition to the hospital, the fledgling hospital administration trainee scheme, which you put your heart and soul into, like everything else you've done. Now it's a well-established, structured training program which has produced many fine administrators. When you and I first started in the profession, I think it's fair to say the College of Hospital Administrators, as it was then known, was a fairly amateurish educational body. Your constant efforts and contributions to the college over the ensuing years has been a major contribution in making it the fully professional and respected body it is today. I always think of you as that completely dedicated, busy individual, whether going to or coming from a meeting or organising something for your hospital or the college. Despite this, whenever a friend, colleague, or anyone else for that matter, approached you about something, your inevitable reply was, "How can I help you?" And help you did. Ron, you've always been a gentleman in every sense of the word, and I know how you've felt about some of the multiple changes that have occurred constantly over the more recent years. Despite this, you've still remained the same pleasant personality and continued to give of your best. You've run a first-class race, my friend, and I consider it a privilege to have been your colleague and associate during these many working years. Your old friend, Derek Howes. Folks, would you please welcome Alan McCarroll.
Ron's asked that the formal part of the proceedings be short and sweet. I don't have any trouble being short. And now that Derek Howes has taken up 2/3 of the time, we have even less time. And the first item to suffer is going to be the distinguished guest list. I'm forced to work with an impossibly short distinguished guest list, and so if you're not on it, don't feel any less distinguished. I must recognise, of course, Elizabeth, Ron's wife, and Ron's family who are with us tonight. Kevin Stewart, former Minister for Health, and Mrs Stewart. To the former Director General and the current Director General of Health, Bernie Amos and Mick Reid. I was going to recognise the former Director General of Corrective Services and also the former Commissioner of Corrective Services and Director General of Community Services. But I've heard they've snuck in on the one ticket. So I'm going to relegate them to the hoi polloi. If you haven't heard your name by now, you've missed the cut. No need looking at me like that, Peter. You get a bit later in the main body of the text. With this sort of time constraint, you're not going to get 2 goes. Ron's asked me to point out his disappointment that the Chief Executive Officer of the Ambulance Service has chosen not to wear mess uniform tonight. Those of you who don't know what a mess uniform is, it's not a dress uniform, it's not a field uniform, it's a mess uniform. It's preserved exclusively for mess, which is a formal dinner, a formal internal dinner, and this is a formal dinner. Great. Just a quiet word later, I think. Ron, you can't humiliate people in public, I don't think. Ron, as we know, did a brief stint at the ambulance service. He was dragged from the region and they put him in charge for the ambulance service for a while. And he came back terribly impressed with the traditions of the service, and in particular, the importance of preserving the old mess uniform. I think he still pops on his mess uniform for the more than casual dues with Elizabeth. That's right. Ron's secondment to ambulance is a reminder of just how far Ron's traversed this system of ours, been just about everywhere in the system, except the department. And in that time he's built up a tremendous network, and this is a true story just to show you how good Ron's network is. Mick Reed had a quiet word to me and said, would you like to think about taking on Western Sydney, the Chief Executive Officer job at Western Sydney? He said, but don't tell anyone about it. And I said, no, I'll have a think about it, I won't tell anyone. And I didn't tell anyone about it. The next morning I had a call from Ron. This is true. And he said, we have a golf day out here and I've heard you play golf, would you like to come out and join us? Ron's network is so vast that he doesn't actually have to use it anymore. He actually extracts important information from the ether. The other thing that sticks in my mind about Ron is his mastery of the language. I don't mean mastery in the way that Bernie Deedy's got mastery of the language. I mean, if Bernie's ever caught short for a word, he makes one up. But in Ron's case, he's dedicated pretty well a full career to the perfection of one phrase, and that phrase is "in the sense that." Now, if you go through documentation in Western Sydney and see what Ron has written over the years, I defy you to go more than 3 paragraphs without copying an "in the sense that." I'm sure it started as a simple sort of diversionary tactic when you're under a bit of pressure in conversation. It's the sort of use of the old "in the sense that" the linguists call the simple reflective redundant, which is, for example, going down that path may involve some difficulty, in the sense that it might not be entirely easy. But Ron took that simple usage and developed into the more complex usages, like the diplomatic. And here's an example of the diplomatic. This proposal may not be quite ready as yet, in the sense that it contains enormous potential for further improvement. There's the cautionary usage. It may be worth delaying that call for an hour or so, in the sense that your communication may be enhanced when you stop frothing at the mouth. And then there's the emphatic usage. The project is not coming together entirely as planned, in the sense that it's totally stuffed. As well as being told to be short, I was told to not get serious. I know you're the honoured guest, but you can't run everything, mate. And I'm going to be serious just for a moment. Here's where you come in, Peter. I remember a memorable speech that the chairman gave at Blacktown Hospital last Christmas. And I'll paraphrase slightly, paraphrase in the sense that the words mightn't be exactly the same. But Peter said, to me, a real person is defined by 2 characteristics: frankness and courage. Now, time doesn't permit me to go on and tell you how the chairman then developed that particular thought, so we'll just have to leave it at that. But if that's the Castaldi test of a real person, I thought we just might run Ron up against it for a moment. Frankness. One of the toughest jobs in management, and the job where most of us fall down from time to time, are those situations where you know how you have to tell people things and you know that the response is either going to be anger, hostility, disappointment, or another strong negative emotion. And if you look at the weaknesses in most managers and where they fall down most, is that they don't do their work in that particular area. And I remember all the times that Ron carried not only his own load in that area, but my load and a load of a lot of our colleagues in that very hard, tough process of patient negotiation where strong emotions and strong feelings are involved. That was a mark to me, the amount of times that he put up his hand and said, I'll do this one, I'll handle him, I'll do that. That was the mark to me of his commitment to our organisation, his commitment to the team and the sort of guy he was. And that to me is what frankness is all about in a management sense. You know what must be done and you know what you have to say to people, despite the reaction that you might get to get it done. On the second Tindale criteria, courage, well, I don't think you need arguments in support of a self-evident proposition. So to me, Ron, you passed the Tindale test, you passed every other test we could throw at you. In the sense that we place a very high value on what you've done, and we have enormous respect for what you are. Thanks, Ron.
Folks, would you welcome Bill Lawrence?
Thanks, Mike, and might also say thank you, Derek, and thank you, Alan. In 1997, Ron was invited to address the Hong Kong Hospital Authority's convention. Ron was president of the Australian Healthcare Association. He was invited to speak in Hong Kong on leadership and learning. Now, I've got a bit of a network, nothing like Ron's, but I did hear from others that were in attendance that Ron's papers were typically excellent.